What happens when a child never leaves the room where he was raised, but is still handed a kingdom? History likes to imagine kings as fully formed men the moment the crown touches their head. Decisive, dominant, certain. But sometimes power does not create adulthood. Sometimes it freezes development exactly where fear began. Louis Auguste of France, later Louis XVI, was never allowed to grow up. From early childhood, his life was structured around obedience, not identity. He was not encouraged to explore desire, ambition, or confidence. He was trained to wait, to listen, to submit to ritual. Tutors corrected every gesture. Courtiers observed every reaction. Affection was conditional. Mistakes were remembered. In such an environment, childhood does not mature. It retreats. By adolescence, the Dauphin had learned one thing well: how to disappear inside himself. He spoke softly. He avoided confrontation. He preferred tools and mechanisms, locks, keys, clocks, objects that responded predictably, unlike people. When women entered his life, the pattern intensified. They required engagement, vulnerability, assertion, things he had never been taught to practice safely. Where others learned confidence through trial and error, Louis learned caution through surveillance. Then came the crown. Suddenly, the boy who had been trained to hesitate was expected to command millions. The child who had been punished for initiative was now supposed to embody authority. The transformation never happened. At court, people sensed it almost immediately. He was polite, kind, earnest. But something essential was missing. Presence, gravity, the feeling that an adult mind occupied the throne. They did not say it aloud at first. They rarely do. Instead, they watched. They waited. They whispered. The marriage to Marie Antoinette was meant to finish his education, to force adulthood through necessity, to turn hesitation into responsibility. Instead, it exposed the truth. The bed became another test he did not know how to pass, not because of cruelty or indifference, but because development cannot be rushed by ceremony. A child does not become a man because history demands it. And so France was ruled by someone who had inherited power without ever inheriting himself. In the crownless realm, this is the most dangerous kind of ruler. Not evil, not violent, but unfinished. A man trapped inside the emotional architecture of childhood, now expected to hold the weight of a nation. The crown did not make him grow up. It only made his immaturity visible. Dependence disguised as virtue. Louis Auguste did not rule alone. He never had. From childhood, decisions had always arrived from above. Tutors, governors, relatives, traditions older than memory. Obedience had been praised as maturity, compliance mistaken for wisdom. So when he became king, dependence did not disappear. It simply changed costume. Louis XVI surrounded himself with advisors the way a child clings to adults in unfamiliar rooms. He listened carefully. He absorbed opinions. He hesitated endlessly. Not because he was thoughtful, but because choosing felt dangerous. Every decision carried the threat of being wrong, and being wrong had always meant punishment. This hesitation was praised at first. Courtiers called him cautious, philosophers called him moral. But beneath the surface, something far more fragile was at work. He deferred constantly. Ministers rose and fell not through confrontation, but exhaustion. He delayed reforms not because he rejected them, but because committing to action felt like stepping into open space without permission. Marie Antoinette watched this pattern repeat. In private, she urged him forward. In public, she tried to compensate, sometimes pushing too hard, sometimes retreating entirely. Their dynamic mirrored that of adolescence. One partner immobilized by fear, the other blamed for instability. France noticed. A king who needed guidance in every moment did not inspire confidence. Authority requires the illusion of certainty. Louis provided empathy instead. And empathy, while human, does not command obedience when a nation begins to fracture. The irony was cruel. His moral hesitation, his need to be good, to be approved of, became the very trait that weakened him. He sought consensus when decisiveness was required. He waited for permission when leadership demanded assumption. In the crownless realm, dependence is rarely recognized as weakness at first. It masquerades as virtue. But when crises multiply, when patience evaporates, a ruler who cannot stand alone begins to look less like a protector and more like a child searching the room for instruction. Louis XVI did not lack intelligence. He lacked internal authority. And a king without internal authority is merely a symbol waiting to be replaced. The boy in the bedchamber. Power is often tested first where no one is supposed to look. For Louis XVI, that place was the bedchamber. Marriage was meant to complete him. In royal logic, intimacy was not emotional. It was instructional. A king learned adulthood through possession, confidence through performance, authority through the act itself. But adulthood cannot be imposed by ceremony. When Marie Antoinette entered his life, she did not meet a man uncertain of love. She met a boy uncertain of himself. The bed did not represent pleasure or conquest. It represented exposure, judgment, failure observed and remembered. So he delayed, not out of disinterest, not out of cruelty, but because the bed demanded something he had never been taught how to give, initiative without permission. Versailles watched with microscopic attention. Sheets were examined. Servants speculated. Physicians theorized. What should have been private became communal anxiety, and the narrative returned again to immaturity. A man, they whispered, would act. A child would hesitate. Marie Antoinette paid for his delay. The court began to see her not as a young queen trapped in an unfinished marriage, but as a problem needing explanation. Blame filled the vacuum left by silence. In private, she grew restless. In public, she grew visible. Every laugh sharpened suspicion. Every pleasure was reinterpreted as compensation. Louis retreated further inward. The more pressure mounted, the smaller his world became. He escaped into routines, habits, objects, anything that did not demand transformation. The bed, once a solution, became a symbol of stagnation. In the crownless realm, failure to mature is never neutral. It reshapes relationships. It transfers blame. It converts sympathy into contempt. By the time the marriage was finally consummated, it no longer mattered. The lesson had already been learned by the court and quietly absorbed by the nation. This king does not grow, he waits. And a ruler who waits while history accelerates does not remain a ruler for long, a child on the throne. When Louis XVI finally became king, France did not receive a transformed man. It received the same unfinished one. Only now, hesitation carried consequences. The crown did not awaken authority in him. It magnified his uncertainty. Every decision felt irreversible, every choice a trap. So he treated power the same way he had treated intimacy, cautiously, indirectly, and always too late. Crisis demanded adulthood. Louis responded with delay. Finances collapsed under decades of mismanagement. Ministers begged for reform. The people grew restless. Each moment required a clear hand, a visible will. Instead, the king deferred. Committees were formed. Proposals circulated. Nothing resolved. The court recognized the pattern immediately. This was not strategy. It was avoidance. Marie Antoinette attempted to fill the vacuum. She advised, pressured, sometimes interfered. But in doing so, she confirmed the worst suspicion of all, that the king could not stand alone. What looked like partnership to them looked like dependency to the nation. Pamphlets sensed blood. The image of the child king hardened into caricature. He was drawn as clumsy, passive, overwhelmed by events he did not initiate. The queen was drawn as manipulative, compensating for his absence of authority. Together they became symbols of imbalance. The Estates General, once a tool of monarchy, slipped from his control almost immediately. Where a decisive ruler might have asserted dominance, Louis hesitated, seeking fairness, fearing confrontation, hoping order would reassert itself naturally. It did not. Crowds learned something essential in those moments. The king could be pressured, and once pressure works, it never stops. In the crownless realm, immaturity at the top spreads downward. It teaches the nation that authority is negotiable, that resolve is optional, that power can be tested safely. Louis XVI did not fail because he was cruel or tyrannical. He failed because he never crossed the threshold into adulthood. He remained a boy searching for approval in a world that had outgrown patience. The revolution did not begin with hatred. It began with disappointment. Part 5. When the child is removed. In the end, Louis XVI did not lose his crown in a single moment of violence. He lost it the way a child loses authority, gradually, publicly, and irreversibly. By the time the revolution reached its final phase, the king no longer felt dangerous. He felt irrelevant. Decisions were made around him. Power flowed past him. Even his enemies no longer feared retaliation. That is the final consequence of arrested development at the top. People stop asking permission. At his trial, Louis spoke carefully. Politely, he listened. He responded as if reason and fairness could still rescue him. As if the rules that had governed his childhood, obedience, good behaviour, patience, still applied. They did not. The revolution did not see a king. It saw a man who had never learned to become one. Marie Antoinette would later say that the greatest tragedy of her husband was not weakness, but unreadiness. He had been shaped to survive a court, not crisis, to obey structures, not to dominate events. And so the child on the throne was removed, not because he was monstrous, but because he was unfinished. In the crownless realm, power demands adulthood. It demands inner authority long before titles are bestowed. When a ruler never develops that authority, the crown becomes a costume, and history eventually strips it away. Louis XVI's death did not shock France. It confirmed what many already felt, that a kingdom had been governed by someone still waiting to grow up. If this story revealed something unsettling about power, psychology, and the hidden fragility behind crowns, subscribe to Crownless Realm. Because the most dangerous rulers in history are not always tyrants. Sometimes they're children who were never allowed to become anything else.